Thank you, Sherwood, for sharing your experience with us. I'm sure many of us has got many questions, but this will follow after the last speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Joel Stein, better known as Jody, for his friends, partner in the Corporate and Patents Group in Cohen, Zedek, Latzer, Baratz, Herzliya office. Focuses his practice on high-tech transactions and intellectual property law with an emphasis on representing technology companies. During 6 years of practice in New York, Jody was in the leasing and project finance practice groups of major New York City law firms. Prior to joining Cohen, Zedek, Latzer, Baratz, he served as an in-house counsel to Mofet Venture Capital Fund. He will be speaking about do's and more do's when preparing for fundings.
Okay. I don't know if I can be as inspiring as that was, but I'm going to try. And Chaim, maybe. Okay. So I'm going to present, like very briefly, two products, and both the products are beautiful. And I want you to think about a couple of things. Which one is more susceptible, more amenable to the Kickstarter crowdfunding, like we were inspiringly, inspired by Sherwin, and which one is significantly more difficult to fund that way? And then I want you to think about what, if you're an entrepreneur, which side your product or your company leans toward. And I think if we answer those questions, you'll see why the Israeli crowdfunding, the ecosystem has taken on the shape that it's taken. And let's see if I can call up the first one, which is really nice. Watch this. It's amazing. Okay. Down. Isn't that elegant and beautiful, right? It's like, it's just lovely. And it costs $20. You can apply for it early before it came out. It had thousands and thousands. It's called the Flip Stand. It had thousands of customers who funded its development, its marketing, its production. And it was a tremendous success in crowdfunding. And I'm going to show you another product that is as beautiful, but you're not going to notice. It's called Port Knox, and it is arguably, happens to be a client of mine, arguably the best network security system in the world. It is just, it's in use by hundreds of high secure network systems. It's got amazing features. It's elegantly constructed. And it's just a fantastic thing. It's going to be the next RSA. Okay, two questions. Which of these two products is susceptible, amenable to a Kickstarter crowdfunding, and which is less amenable to that? And which of these products is more similar to your product or to the typical Israeli startup? So I think the answer is very clear. The first one is beautiful. The second one is beautiful too, but the first one is not something that you would typically see from an Israeli startup, at least from the startups that we've seen. We see a lot of them. It's a design, it's cute, and it's so, I want that. Give me that. I'll pay $20 now. Send it to me in 3 months when it's done. The second one is extremely sophisticated. It's a network product. It's $40,000 for 150 seats, so it's for reasonably large organizations, and it's quite expensive. And it's so powerful, so elegant, and so secure that it's selling beautifully. But you can't kickstart it, right? For that, you need a significantly more sophisticated investor. Now, I showed you something that was obviously not beautiful, although the product itself is beautiful. You really have to be an expert. You have to know the field. You have to know the market. You have to know what the market is looking for and what the competitors are to see how beautiful it is. No one is going to put up $40,000 in advance to buy this great product that they haven't seen yet. Right? For that, you need what the Israeli crowdfunding ecosystem has become. And I'd like to talk about that process, how a company like Access Layers in this case, which developed this wonderful product, got some of its funding, and how that has turned into the ecosystem here. Okay, so we've said that most of the companies in Israel are these more sophisticated, larger investment type of companies, and this is where the crowdfunding in Israel comes in. Now, crowdfunding in Israel, it's not really crowd like Kickstarter is. It's more like club funding. We would call it the angel, or in Hebrew we might say malachei tzvaot, an army of angels, a team of angels who get together in a club. Now, the club is usually run by some kind of sponsor, and there are any number. We have the Our Crowd people we're going to hear from. There's the After Docs. There's just a lot of these clubs of angels who have some particular expertise, business experience, and hopefully money. I'm done here. Okay. And this sponsor gets together people who are probably not rich enough or have enough disposable capital to put themselves into a VC fund, and who also probably want to be involved both in the, involved in the decision making, involved in the excitement of this venture, and they choose this leader, this sponsor. Let's just take the Our Crowd or the After Docs as an example. What the process that you go through with this sponsor, this leader, to get this team of angels is actually, disappointingly, quite similar to the horrible process that you go through to find a VC who will invest in you. The sponsor will interview you. You do your elevator pitch. You send your business plan. You knock on the door. He ignores you. He makes fun of you. The second time he may talk to you. He checks out some of your references. And it's very similar to the degrading feeling of going to ask for money from a large investor. It's got a lot of benefits to it, and we'll discuss those. And it's also got some not insignificant risks that you should be aware of before you go for this team, angel, crowd-ish, hybrid VC funding thing that now exists. It certainly is not easier, and I think it's great that there is this micro crowd, but it's certainly not easier than going to a VC. There is more money available. The deals happen faster, but you have to be, and as you'll see, you have to be better, probably, to get this angel crowd funding than you do, in many cases, to get the VC, and I'll explain why. Okay, so, well, here, let's take the why. When you go to a VC, so after you've been degraded and kicked out and you call 35 times, you sit with the VC, and frequently the power of your personality, your excitement, the product, how much you know about your market has a big effect. They say invest in people. And the power of your person, of your people, your experience has a big effect on the decision that's ultimately made by the VC. In this angel crowdfunding, it's not really like that. The power of your personality, of your ability to convince, will take you only so far. Because once you've gone through the process of convincing this sponsor that, yes, he should sponsor you, he needs to come together with all the tools and all the ammunition, all the sell and pitch that you've given to him that he's going to need to then turn around and sell it to his investors. That means all of that personality that you could express is going to be missing on his pitch to his investors. It also means that the package that you put to this sponsor that he can then go out and sell to his investors has to be so perfect. It has to be boxed with a ribbon on it so that everybody who looks at it, no matter where his perspectives and experience is, he can go, yeah, they've got all the good stuff and I like it. Because if a particular group or one investor or several investors won't invest unless there is a, think of something, unless there is a clear road to marketability and you don't have a clear road, the chances are these investors will pick up on that flaw, and all your pitch that you convince the sponsor for will come to naught. Okay, so you really have to be ready, and you have to be packaged beautifully. Also note, these are very sophisticated investors. These are people who have $50,000, $100,000 to put up, and they almost always have experience that shows them, yes, I can make this investment decision, I can monitor the investment decision, and I want to be involved in here. It's unlikely, again, as opposed to a crowd, although the wisdom of the crowd, it's unlikely you're going to be able to snow or get away with a lot from these investors. All right, so once you convince the sponsor, and we're going through the process of what this Israeli ecosystem of crowd angels investing is, once you go through the process of convincing the sponsor that you're worth his effort, it's going to feel a lot like the VC experience. The sponsor is going to give you a term sheet. It's going to be as horrible as a VC term sheet will be. It's going to have the vetoes and the preemptives and the dilutions and the control and the revesting that we all know and love. And then he's going to take this and he's going to do his diligence along the way at the time of the negotiation of the term sheet. And by the time he's finished with his diligence, the term sheet will be done. Sounds very familiar. And then he's going to go out and he's going to pitch it to his investors. Now, if you're in some cases, the sponsor will put his own skin into the game. And I think investors like that, companies like it too, but not always. It is not always the case that the sponsor will put his own money in, but it certainly convinces the investors. What a very good thing about the sponsor is that he will aggregate all of these investors. It's almost always the case that the investment in the range of 300,000 up to, let's say, 2 million is probably the max that these groups give. He'll aggregate the investors into one entity. It won't be, it's likely it'll be a separate entity for each, or for, let's say, 2 investments, or for each investment will have its own entity. And you will sign this agreement, your investment agreement, with only one entity, and the investors will come into that entity. That's a very, very good thing. You only have one shareholder to deal with at your table as opposed to 10 angels or 500 crowd investors. You have one consent to get when you need a shareholder vote. And you have, okay, so that's the good thing. The other flip side of that good thing is once you've convinced, or the sponsor has convinced these investors to come in, they become your advocates. And I think this is what we see on the Kickstarter, on the mass crowd. You have very, very sophisticated, almost always experienced investors who then become, wherever they sit around the world, be it geographically or in the markets around the world, become your advocate. They have made an active decision to invest in you. The chances are they will advise, or they will promote, or think of channels and suggest and mentor you along the way. That can be a very, very powerful tool, as powerful or more powerful than your typical angels who may be of limited scope, limited experience. And that is certainly something that you should take advantage of. Okay, so we see that this process is not made for everybody. It's not for the 2 guys in the garage who have the great idea. For the flip stand, which is really beautiful, that was made in the garage, and it is for a crowdfunding or for a pre-order process. For network security, for a large application, an ERP, that, the micro investment will probably not be enough, and you will need this expertise to check out and to see what you need and to raise the proper amounts of money. Now, let's go to a couple of the downsides, and then we'll go into some of the do's and don'ts about how to make your package beautiful with a ribbon on it so that it's really got everything. Some of the downsides are that you can go through this process of getting yourself ready, of convincing your sponsor that you are worth his time and effort, and then he cannot come up with goods. So you will have spent a tremendous amount of effort that you would spend with your VC also, but here you went through it relatively successfully. You finished up all your sprucing up that you might have needed, and the sponsor could go back and say, look, I thought I could do it and I can't. And that can be a not cheap process. That process can be time-consuming and quite expensive for a company that is stretched on its dollars. One other thing that it is never too early to start about thinking about and acting on investor relations. Your sponsor, and particularly these angels that invest in you, will almost always call your angel investors. They will want to hear from, yes, these guys have hit their targets, they said they could do this, they came through, and once the angels come in, then once the crowd angels come in, the investor relations becomes even more important. You have to report. You have to send out progress reports on a regular basis and keep these people informed. Pick up the phone to these investors as time allows, certainly quarterly, if not more. Okay, so some of the do's as you develop your some of the important things that you can't skip. And I'm just going to say this again. If you come with wild and crazy structures to a crowd funding source, everybody's going to go, I'm sorry, I don't invest in BVI companies. You know, why? I just don't. The goal, and we hear that all the time, the goal is to come so that no investor has to say, oh, I don't do that unless, I won't invest unless they have a patent, unless they are a Delaware company, unless this and that. And let's just go through those. I left these on your chairs. I think I had a sufficient amount for most of them. I tried to develop, and the theme is simplicity. I tried to develop a couple of issues, the things to adopt and the things to avoid. Again, the idea is people should like your idea, they should like you, they should like your product and your marketability, and you shouldn't have to get tripped up on complications that people are going to say, I won't do that. So the first one is simple. Your corporate structure, I assume if you've got market traction, how am I doing? I'm fine. If you've got market traction, if you've got a product, if you're not just in the garage, you've already set up a company. Take my advice. Delaware or Israel, not BVI and not the Isle of Jersey. I heard that somebody raised money in this thing from a Hong Kong company because it had a China aspect to it. But don't do crazy tax structuring in order to start your company. It would be very simple. Plain vanilla will win. Okay, directors. You can't come and say, oh, the two of us, the two founders are the directors and it's been going great so far. People want to know that you're willing to take criticism, that you're willing to take outside advice, because they are going to be the criticism and the outside advice also. Build your board before you get to your pitch. Your board should always have someone who has some relevant experience in the field or in the business, not just the two founders. The share structure, we're going to spend 2 seconds on it. Ordinary or common, nothing more. Nobody gets special rights, nobody gets special preferreds. The VC investor or these crowd, they will demand it, but all the founders should be on the same, even, boring playing field. Founders agreement, you need something, again, nothing special. No hardwired control of the company, no debt to founders that has to be repaid, nothing special other than he gets 50% and he gets 40% and we split the directors evenly. If it's more than a couple of pages, it's too complicated, and it'll trip you up when people say these guys aren't pursuing the right things. A couple more things. Your employment agreements or consulting agreements, if you have no money, totally simple. Small salaries, small termination benefits. Nobody invests in a company where the founder has 120 days of termination. It's just not going to happen. The IP, sorry for saying it, and I'm nogea badavar. Everybody needs a patent. Okay? Even if you say, my business is not relevant for patents, there's something out there that you can protect. And a provisional is cheap. It lasts for a while. think about something that you can protect, because it is a checkbox that a lot of investors will look to as a barrier to entry. Privacy and data security is Chaim's thing, but yes, Israelis don't pay attention to it sufficiently. The Europeans are crazy about privacy and data security, and the Americans are becoming that way because of the news of the last few weeks. If you think this is not important to investors, you're wrong. Privacy and data security, the end-user license agreement, the terms of use, how you're protecting your databases are very important. Do not neglect it when you come to present yourself. It's not hard to get clearance. It's easy to stay into compliance, but don't forget it. Distribution. You can't come to a bunch of sophisticated investors and say, we haven't thought about our distribution agreements. We haven't thought about our channels. No, we haven't yet started talking to strategics. Unless you have sales traction or say, here's my path and I'm almost there with this $400,000, I can make it, you're just not going to attract the attention. Other things, have your option plan in place. And if it means having a 102 in Israel, the 102 option law, or the 409 study in the United States, a couple $1,000, but it's ready. You put a checkbox. Yes, I have incentivized my employees. I've done that. I've checked and I'm in compliance. The same with financial statements. Sorry, you're going to have to get a Big Four. You know, investors certainly from Israel and definitely from overseas are not going to take your neighbor as your accountant. Finally, if you've got a regulatory, if you've got a medical device, certainly if you've got a compound, or anything that requires regulatory approval, regulatory input, you got to come with your roadmap. Here's what I need. I've been to an expert. I know I will get clinical trials or 510K, or I'm a nutraceutical, and here's all I need. Here's the cost at each step. I've got counsel, and this is the money I need. If there's one lesson from this whole chart, it's funny because lawyers are supposed to be a lot of things. We try to think we're smart, and most of what we spend our smarts doing is making things simple. So this whole chart is the plain vanilla, and check all the boxes on your requirements will be the most attractive thing that you can do to get investment. Thank you.